So this is the next trend that I'm now moving to, which is where once you're actually in the boat as opposed to swimming in the water, you can move far further. Augmented humanity is about how you become superhuman. How you can wake up every day the way Marvin's waking up and be superhuman because he's already got many, many people working with him on things that he couldn't achieve on his own, which allows him to get into flow. And augmented humanity is a term which was first coined by Eric Schmidt in 2010, when he was saying that we are entering the age of augmented humanity. And this comes in two forms. There's a physical form, and then there's also the non-physical form. Let me talk about the physical form first of all. It really is about us becoming superhuman. Here is an image of Army unveiling exoskeleton. As with all the other articles I'm using, I'm deliberately making them all within the last week. This one basically was May 25th, so it was just a week before. And this is basically about what happens when you put on an the exoskeletons were first created by companies like Berkeley Bionics, which is now called Exo, which is the story I want to tell you about the guys we met at Singularity. And the head of Berkeley Bionics, when he basically was the first to think there must be ways for us to use robotics to actually make our bodies stronger. And he, in his first contracts, were with the Army. Because basically the way this thing works is that you've actually got an outside skeleton. That's why it's exoskeleton. And it basically is just, all the machinery where if you're going to bend your leg, it can tell that you're trying to bend your leg, and it bends your leg for you. Which means you don't actually need to have much strength at all. You can lift, like these Army guys, they can lift 5, 10 times what they'd normally be able to lift on their own just by going out and picking it up. And the whole thing just like picks up something that's 10 times. Brilliant if you go to the gym. So this allows you to just become superhuman in your strength. Now, what was interesting about this is that at the point where I met up with Berkeley Bionics, before they changed the name to Exo, they had a bit of a problem on this because they were doing this. It was clearly making them a lot of money, but it was for war. And they were like, is that really what our life's going to be about? Is actually, better killing machines. So they sat down and they thought, well, what else could we use this for that could really make a difference? And that's what they came to Singularity University to talk about. Because when they came, they had one of the guys who showed up, and he was wearing one of these. And basically, the exoskeleton which they created, which has gone on to win a whole bunch of different awards, allows someone who is in a wheelchair to walk again. So this is about knowing that they've already got the ability to move certain areas, and that, this can tell when they're trying to stand up. And it actually allows them to stand up. It allows them to walk. And the most fundamental thing about this is when they stood up, they gave us statistics of how many people around the world at the moment are wheelchair bound. How many have thought they'd never be able to walk again? They also went through the fact that whereas in a place like America, most places are friendly at least to wheelchairs so that you can get from one place to another. There's many parts in the world where they don't have that kind of access, which means it's not just a matter of the fact that you need a wheelchair. You don't even have a wheelchair. You can't even move. And so this shifts and changes everything for an entire generation, and it's the same machinery that can kill. So it's about how we apply all this information and where we're going. You can take the same information about what can happen physically, and you can take it intellectually and say, well, what can we do when we have the power to achieve anything? Where we can wake up every day and say, I have not just the opportunity to create anything, I have the power to create anything, then what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? So these 3 levels, yellow, green, and blue, are about the 3 levels that are above here now. These are the green levels here, which will take us up to this level. These 3 levels here are when you start to get a view. It's when you're actually making good money now. But if you haven't got the basic foundation in place, even if your business makes money, you'll still end up with nothing. And without question, there are people I know who, even though they've got successful businesses, they lose it all, they always go back to nothing again. And this is about what we talk about, building your wealth. So these 3 levels up here, think about it like music. Think about it like the fact that as you go up these 3 levels, you have the first level here, which is now the yellow level, which is the player. So many of you would have found out you were a player level. Player level is when you're playing the instrument, when it sounds great, when people love coming to hear it play, but frankly, the moment you stop playing, the music stops. You're self-employed, you're kind of doing all the work. It's one person doing all things, as opposed to green level, where it's all people doing one thing. So it's the opposite. So this is like the one-man band, trying to make it all happen and make all the music happen. And there's a reward at this level, which is freedom. And there's a reward at this level, which is significance, because people love coming to hear you play. In fact, you're like, well, I've got no more time anymore because I'm such a good coach, or I've got no more time anymore because everyone's coming to see me as the doctor. And the problem with that is that what they're coming to see you with, they're finding that the more you're able to kind of make it up as you go, the more you can just kind of like, just ad-lib it, the more they want to see you. So you keep on trying new things, and they keep on loving it, and you keep on doing more and more and more, so that you've got something that's impossible to replicate. So there's no way other people can come on and take the work from you. And so this is where you get stuck at yellow level, where you get freedom, but at the next level up, green, you've actually got to give some of your freedom away. This is performer, which is where it's about the band, it's not about the individual. You've got to give up some of your significance. So a lot of people at yellow goes, I just can't find people good enough. I can't find people good enough to come and work and do the stuff that I do, which isn't actually true at all. Because it can't be that you're the only person on the planet to do what you do, because surely there's other people out there doing stuff like you much, much better already. And if you disappeared from the planet tomorrow, the whole thing doesn't stop. So we're like, well, I'm indispensable. We actually create that fantasy around ourselves, and somehow we enjoy that fantasy to the extent that we can never grow further. Performer level is when all people do one thing. Because what's happened at this point is you've had to put down the guitar, put down the kind of instrument that everyone wants you to play, and you've got to start playing the drums instead. You've actually got to start creating a rhythm, a beat. You've got to show up for meetings at certain times. You've got to be there with the team, and you've got to deliberately not take things that they're doing. And this is a tough thing to do, but it means changing your model as well to make it happen. So there's some people like, I can't ever break through, no matter what ways come, from just being the one-man bands to the team. And again, for those people I'm meeting tomorrow, when I see you here, I'll tell you exactly what the steps are to move up, because there's some very specific steps that you take. And then from the green, it goes to blue, which is where all the music happens. And this is the conductor. And one thing you notice about the conductor is the conductor, who is multiple businesses, multiple asset, and he's managing by portfolio now at this level. This person here plays very, very differently. In fact, they're making all the music like an orchestra conductor, but they're making the music without actually holding an instrument. In fact, they're not even facing the audience. They're actually facing their performers. And the fundamental difference of here and here is they've put down everything, so that when all of a sudden something happens, like the violinist didn't show up, they don't say, well, I'll go do that then, and go off and start playing the violin. They don't do that. They stay at the front, making sure they're not touching any of the instruments, and it's at a very, very different level. So in a way, the story of me being at green level when I was CEO and deciding to be chairman, that decision was me shifting up to blue level, so I was no longer in trying to run my businesses. That's what Mark Victor Hansen, exactly the same situation. He's like, he plays it up here, have other people running those businesses, and it's just a different way to solve problems than you would have if you had it here. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. Now, by the way, you could say, well, what was my $1 million question? And my $1 million question a couple of years ago was specifically, how could I run all my businesses from anywhere in the world, most specifically from a beach in Bali? How could I do that? And how could I do it just using an iPad? So I had that question. And what I'm going to do, without spending a lot of time on it, but just to show you how easy it could be, and you don't have to be a multimillionaire to make it happen, is I basically created just a cobbling up of a series of the very, very best in breed in terms of platforms around the world. So there's my question. How do I do that? How do I get onto that and make it happen? So I'm just going to show you how what I did was I got together with the team, and we decided on a number of platforms. And you can write down these platforms if you think they might be valuable to you. But remember that what I'm about to share with you is a particular kind of knowledge. Just to be key, in the same way we talked about teaching teachers and learning leaders, or leading learners, we also have got two types of knowledge. One type of knowledge is called disposable knowledge. And one type of knowledge is called sustainable knowledge. And your success in life will be in your ability to determine which is which. Because disposable knowledge is something you're learning that within 5 years' time will be totally useless to have learnt it. A lot of what we learn at school is disposable knowledge. We're never going to use that stuff. If you're learning at the moment how to put together a Facebook page, it's disposable. You don't need to know any of that stuff. Well, and how do you know that it's something disposable? Well, if you can't figure out if in 5 years' time you need that information, ask yourself, would that information have been useful 5 years ago? And if 5 years ago, it's like, well, we didn't even have Facebook fan pages 5 years ago, so of course it wouldn't be useful. Then don't bother learning it. Get an expert who can do it for you. So unless you are the expert, don't learn it, because anything disposable is when we're learning things or we're hearing things like, oh, I better do that, and then we've just filled our brains with more stuff which is going to become redundant anyway. So if you're not going to do that, what are you going to do? Sustainable knowledge is knowledge which is going to be there even 20 years down the line and still be relevant. So how you go about picking up information is sustainable. How you go about making connections, even your connections themselves, and how you're looking after those connections is all sustainable. So there's a fundamental shift here where as you start building sustainable, instead of not worrying about that because you're getting disposable, you start growing and growing and growing effectively. So on that side, I'm going to give you now some disposable knowledge, which means you don't have to make any notes if you want. You can just see what I did. And the sustainable part will be on just the thinking process I went through. I said I want a way to plan. So we use LivePlan right now to plan. And it's basically a very simple subscription model, gives us a way to plan. I want a way to have I don't want to ever have an excuse that I don't know how to do an agreement. I don't know how to put together a franchise. I don't want to, anything to do with my business. So we use this, which is called BizTree, world's #1 business document template software. A couple $100. You have every single template on anything you'd ever want in a business, all put together, simply there, download to your Mac, and update it as you need it. Put together basically a way for us to manage all our projects. We use Basecamp. Some of you will be familiar with some of these. Basecamp means that whenever we have any team working on any project, we always will have Basecamp there for us to be able to track it. And then we also then do all our accounts on QuickBooks Online, deliberately on the QuickBooks Online version, because that one I can look in real time at our accounts from a beach in Bali. And no matter if someone just entered something in from anywhere in the world, I can see it, which I can't do if it's sitting on a closed network somehow. And then from all of that, we then basically link all of that to this thing here, which is called Salesforce, which is the CRM that we use to track all the information that's out there. And we've deliberately picked on each one of these something which is best of breed. There was a time when if you wanted the best in the world, it would cost you more. Today, the best in the world costs you less because more people are using the best in the world. So they're able to share the cost out between more people now. So you go for the best in the world, and you go for the ones that have developer communities, because that way you're not relying on the management of the company to stay up to date with technology. The developer community will do it anyway. And so we said that's how we want to do it, because no one can keep up, even the best, smartest brains in the world. But if they have a developer community, they've got an army of people that will figure it out. So that's why we use Salesforce as opposed to something like Interspire. And then we have, for example, Post Affiliate Pro, which connects all our affiliates up, does all our tracking, linked all of that to Interspire, which is our web store, and basically is the structure. I've gone through it really quick, but that was all we needed in order for me now to have on my laptop in real time my entire business, all my businesses, that I can see wherever I am in the world. That's a global business. Even if it's for a business that's local, it still gives me that chance to be traveling anywhere in the world, and there's no difference now between if I'm on holiday, if I'm working, because I've got that information right at my fingertips. We had a question?
Is there any way for us to get an email or something with a list of all those websites?
Yeah, everyone who's here today, all the things I'm sharing here that have links to anything, you'll be getting an email which has all of that on it, right? Yeah. Good question. Good question. So I'm moving on. I'm moving on at speed here because we have a number of ways which are going to blow your socks off. So in the same way that we were looking at the past 100 years ago, let me ask you, do you think that in the past they were also looking at the future? Would you like to see what they thought would be happening in the future 80 years ago? Yeah. This was a video that was put together 80 years ago. So this is in the 1920s. This was after the First World War, before the Second World War. They believed there was never going to be a Second World War. They were like, we're in a land of prosperity. And they had some big dreams for us. They had big dreams of what would be happening by the year 2000. And you're about to see exactly what they believed, with some level of certainty, would be happening in the world. So just sit back and enjoy a picture of the future from the past.
Some of the most famous fashion designers in the US today have been asked to forecast what Eve will look like in AD 2000. One idea is a dress that can be adapted for morning, afternoon, or evening. It's the sleeves what does it. Apparently in AD 2000 we shall be having a hair-raising time. Yet another designer goes so far as to believe that skirts will disappear entirely. Shoes will have cantilever heels, and an electric belt will adapt the body to climatic changes. The lightly clad woman of tomorrow, ooh, swish, will move in an atmosphere that's scientifically kept at the right temperature. The future bride in a wedding dress of glass. What the groom will wear, apart from a worried look, isn't mentioned. A dress of aluminium, with a sash to change it for afternoon or evening, and an electric headlight to help her to find an honest man. As for him, if he matters at all, he'll be fitted with a telephone, a radio, and containers for coins, keys, and candy for cuties.
No one can clearly...
So that's what they have planned for what we're up to today. And other than some of the headdresses we saw, I think a lot of the rest of it is a fantasy, a path to go, but one which has got to make us wonder, well, what are we looking at for the future, which is fantasy? What are we looking at the future, which is about where we want to go? So I'm going to ask you a very important question, which leads up to our next three waves. And this is, what do you think would be the one biggest disruptor in the next 30 years? Out of all the different technological things going on, what would be the one which would be the most significant one that could change everything? I'm going to give you a moment to turn to the person next to you and just come up with your best guess of what would be the biggest thing, technologically wise, or for the future that would impact us all from what we currently are up to today.